Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, guests, staff, and councillors. I'd like to call to order this City of Salmon Arm regular council meeting of Tuesday, November the 12th. You have an agenda in front of you. I'll just check with staff first and see if there's any additions to the agenda from staff.
Your Worship, there are two late items from staff. Item 18.1 under other business is a letter from Creative BC regarding a grant application. And the second item, 11.3, is an email from the Okanagan Regional Library.
Okay, and that's item 11.3. Thank you. Are there any additions from council? Okay, seeing none. Councillors, are there any disclosures of interest on any of the items that we're discussing today? Okay, I see no disclosure of interest. We'll go into our business then, starting with the confirmation of minutes of our last council meeting of October the 28th. We have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, that the regular council meeting minutes of October 28, 2019 be adopted as circulated.
Any additions or omissions to those minutes? All those in favor? Thank you. We'll go to tab 6, committee reports. The first one is Development Planning Services Committee meeting minutes of November the 4th. We have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Lindgren, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting minutes of November 4, 2019 be received as information.
Thank you. Any additions or omissions from those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Item 6.2, the Greenways Liaison Committee meeting minutes of October the 17th. We have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, that the Greenways Liaison Committee meeting minutes of October 17, 2019 be received as information.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Normally I don't speak directly to the minutes, but this was a fairly, in my view, eventful discussion at the last Greenways Committee. There are two ongoing historical projects that do, I think, have some relevance for the table to get updated on. And the best, actually, folks, staff are best to update on the historical part of it. Again, that is, I can give a quick little 3-minute summary, but I don't have the longitudinal aspect of this. The first one is 6.2 Ida View Trail. The Greenways Liaison Committee supports the advancement of the trail, which is essentially to say this is important and we should be moving along. It doesn't, and basically involves looking at opportunities for funding and further development. But I was wondering if through you, Your Worship, staff could give that brief historical perspective that I don't have.
Yes, thank you very much. Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your Worship, I'll tag team with Mr. Pearson on this one a little bit. So I can speak to the initial project. We started this project in 2014 with in cooperation and help with the Shuswap Trail Alliance to develop a trail that would connect from the South Canoe Trailhead basically through and across the Canoe Creek up to essentially connecting to the Rubberhead. So running on top of the range closest to the community as opposed to going around the backside of the mountain. There was some initial consultation done with the property owners at the base of the mountain. They were opposed to it initially. There was some fear of basically the trail leading to other social trails that would connect to their properties and that they might get some trespassing. At that time, there wasn't intensive communication with the property owners, but more recently we had a site meeting, in fact this year, and we spoke to several of them and explained how the planning process was being done and sort of what the vision of this trail was going to be. We haven't really heard anything back from them, so I'm assuming that they might be satisfied with the answers we gave them. The trail Mr. Pearson has it up on the screen. This is the shot of the OCP map. And it essentially follows that red line, or green line, I guess. Yeah, thank you. So like I say, it's been in the planning process for a long time. We did bring it back to the Greenways Liaison Committee for any comments or concerns that they might have, and it appears that they are supportive of the project moving forward. Now, having said that, there is an extensive bridge design that needs to be completed, and some fencing and basically some trail wayfinding to keep anyone using this future trail on the trail as opposed to going to these social paths.
Thank you very much. Does the Director of Development Services have anything to add to that?
Your Worship, I think Mr. Nieuwenhausen covered it off pretty good. The history dates back about 10 years when the planning was done for this with the Greenways Committee. Around 2008, we started on a comprehensive Greenway strategy. We have a document for that strategy. It was incorporated into the official community plan, into a bylaw, and there was a lot of public consultation at that time for this linkage here. Now it's being called Mount Ida View Trail. I can't remember what it was called back then, but this is city-owned property where most of the South Canoe Trail network is located. This is a Metford Dam. There's a little lake there where a reservoir, city property, Crown land here, and even 10 years ago, there was concern from property owners at the base of the hill with a trail going along this alignment, more or less. This is a general alignment. It's a little bit more precise now with GPS. And it's one of several linkages in our OCP where there was some public opposition towards it. And another linkage that's in the same minutes is this proposal here from Haney Park to Little Mountain Park, which is considered a high priority in the OCP and our corporate strategy. So that's referenced in the minutes as well.
It's very useful history for us, I think. Councillor Lavery, do you wish to add anything?
No, I just, thanks to staff for that. So essentially as things progress, we're now looking at some of the key recommendations that have been on the books for a long time. Certainly with the Haney Heritage Trail, I mean, there's been a priority on heritage trails and waterfront, and staff have been working on the Mount Ida View Trail for quite a while. So I just wanted to update Council on that, and thanks to staff actually for building my capacity on these matters as well. Your Worship, the last one I want to refer to in the minutes is item number 776, the role in integrated planning. And I've briefly mentioned this before, but just to update Council. In terms of taking over as the chair, I sat down with individual members and just asked them what's been working well, what could work better in the future, and almost to a person, it was we like what we're doing, but we want to talk and discuss and view in a larger way. And some actively mentioned active transportation, others actually described it without using the words. So we're just in, it's not going to take over our meetings. The committee fully recognizes that the advisory committee and the terms of reference are a function of council on that, but we're just having these beginning discussions of what could be in the next while, and just to update council on that.
Great, thank you very much, and thanks for having individual discussions with those members. It's always a good thing to do. Anything else, Councillor Lavery, on the minutes? Okay, Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I just had a question about item 7.2 in these minutes, Mount Ida Forestry Road. I had a resident from the Foothills region ask me yesterday about this very spot, and so I just wondered if someone could fill me in on the history of I understand that this is a private road that leaves Foothills Road and then branches off onto the Forestry Road, and he was wondering Is that a private road? Does the homeowner have the right to restrict access to that road? Do we have any concerns about people trying to reach the forestry road? And he was wondering who's been grading and upgrading the forestry road there and for what purpose? And I didn't have any answers.
Okay, we'll just check with staff and see if they're aware. Director of Engineering and Public Works?
Your worship, city planning staff and myself have been dealing with the property owner there. And essentially it's the trail, or it's a road that, actually Kevin, do you know where it is? It's, no, further down. It's right by the cemetery. So it's right there, that long little property there, right there. So that property has a panhandle that connects to Foothills. And that is where the forestry road, the province actually has a right of way over top of that road to access the forestry road. And then the forestry road meanders through the green area, which is city property, and goes up Mount Ida. So we also have water infrastructure and Rumble Creek, so we use the road to access as well. And I believe that one of the city planners has contacted the province or the Ministry of Forestry to determine whether they would be in favor of having a gate there or not. And I believe the issue is that the property owner is having some problems with people parking and maybe possibly blocking off his access. But it is my understanding that there is a right-of-way with the province for accessing that forest. And it is an active forest road, so I don't know how they could potentially block it off. The city does not have a right-of-way over top of that, but I guess that's about all I can update on.
Thank you. Councillor Lindgren, did you want to follow up at all?
Yeah, so essentially the homeowner owns his driveway and the public does not have a right to access the forestry road through his driveway, correct?
No, Your Worship, that's not correct. The public has the right to access forestry roads. And forestry has a right-of-way over that, but the public doesn't necessarily have the right to park and block his driveway off because it is the property owner's
Right. Okay.
property. So it's a little bit gray. And I think what's happening is some of the people that are parking there are actually using it for recreational use. And so that's becoming a bit of an issue for the property owner.
Yeah, so what resolution are we seeking? Are we going to restrict access or
It's
restrict
not,
parking?
Your Worship, it's not really up to us. We don't have any rights over the property. It would be up to the Ministry of Forest and the property owner to sort that out.
Okay, thanks.
I would suspect that there might be some signage that goes up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Any other discussion around those minutes? I just had one follow-up question to the Mount Ida View Trail. Could we just see that map again? I just want to make sure that I understand. Okay, so the actual trail itself is not going over private property, is that right?
That's right, Your Worship.
Okay, but the private property owners up from 60th Street are worried that if the trail's not delineated, people might wander down into their property by mistake. Is that correct?
There's concerns about trespassing.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I understand then. Thank you very much. Any other additions, omissions, questions? Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I just mention, this has been an active discussion at the GLC, and certainly Shuswap Trails is aware of this as well. We have all sorts of informal trails through the city that have been used for a long period of time, some of which go through, in fact, many go through private land in a direct way of going in, and some property owners are fine with that, some object to that. In the example that Councillor Lindgren brought up and staff referred to, it is also a key recreational area there. So I think that I would foresee once the right-of-way is clarified and communicated and signage, Shuswap Trails is indicated that they want to be able to broker a solution here as well. So that's where we are.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll call the question on the minutes and all those in favor. Thank you very much, and thanks for the discussion around them. There's no Columbia Shuswap Regional District updates at this meeting. We'll go to staff reports, tab 8. The first staff report is Director of Corporate Services, Shuswap Trail Alliance fee-for-service agreement. And I think we will have a motion on the screen here. We do. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that motion to get it on the floor? Thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Lavery. Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. The current Shuswap Trail Alliance agreement expires on December 31st, 2019, and they have requested an additional 4-year agreement. Staff have no concerns with that. The 44,000 plus CPI adjustment per year was also at the request of Shuswap Trail Alliance to align with the same fee structure as Columbia Shuswap Regional District pays. And the only other change to the current agreement will be when they report to the city. Previously, the reporting dates didn't align well with their work cycles, and it's of no consequence to staff to change those dates.
Great, thank you very much. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. Just a question to staff through you. Just so I'm clear, and maybe that I haven't seen the wording of the annual CPI factored in like this before. So if in 2020 there's a 2% CPI, 2021 will be 44,000 plus 2%?
Director of Corporate Services.
Through your worship, each year is 44,000 plus whatever that year's CPI is. So it's not cumulative as in our previous agreements.
And that was my next question. So that, and this was by request of SDA?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I am pleased to support this wholeheartedly. We know that the work done by the Trail Alliance is very beneficial to the city, both for the residents and for the attraction piece. They do amazing work, and they have a number of funders. They don't rely exclusively on us, but we get great value for the 44,000.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. I agree. Any other questions or comments on this motion? All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Go to staff report 8.2. Director of Corporate Services, Visitor Information Center, fee-for-service agreement. We have a proposed motion. Could I have a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor, please? Councillor Lavery, Councillor Wallace-Richmond, thank you. Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. The fee-for-service arrangement for the Visitor Information Center will expire on December 31st, 2019. And as per Council's budget deliberations, this is a 1-year renewal, and it will come due next year, December 31st, 2019. However, we will bring it back to council for sort of some guidance about how you want to approach visitor information services moving forward after that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks again, Mayor Harrison. Is the applicant, the operator, the chamber aware of this? We're just approving a 1-year fee for service at this time?
Director of Corporate Services.
Sir, through your worship, I have had a conversation with Corin Grayston, as has the council representative, Councillor Cannon.
Good, thank you very much. I assumed that. I do think, based on comments at the table here, Your Worship, that we need a venue for further discussion and clarification of what we are signaling and what the, I don't want to use the word quid pro quo here is, but just what the anticipated value on both sides is on this. And at this stage, I'm not sure of the venue for that, but we do need that further discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. And I agree. And so we will, as a council, have discussions on tourist services in Salmon Arm and what we anticipate they're going to look like. I think it's important we provide that guidance not just to the chamber, but if council chooses to go to RFP at some time, that we have a very clear criteria. So that is something that we'll be working on over the next 3 or 4 months, and we'll provide that information to the chamber. Any other questions around this motion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to introductions of bylaws, tab 9. First one is City of Salmon Arm 2019 to 2023 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4363, first, second, and third reading. We have a motion on the screen. If I could have a mover and seconder. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Lindgren, thank you. I'll ask the Chief Financial Officer to chat with us about this motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. This amendment is to reflect council resolutions made thus far in the year and to redirect allocations between budget accounts. If you have any questions about the memo, I am happy to answer them.
Great, thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions around any of the information in this report? Okay, thank you very much for your report, and I think we're all aware of each one of those. I know I went through it, or we've chatted about most of them. I just wanted to ask about the table 2, the distribution of property taxes between classes, and I know this is a 2019 distribution. For 2020, when might those discussions take place with council?
Through Your Worship, those are typically brought back to council February, March in the spring.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like councillors to put their mind to that particular table and thoughts around it, and we'll certainly be having discussions prior and at the time as far as distribution of property taxes between the classes. Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks. I just had a question on page 52. The City of Salmon Arm financial plan is there. Under consolidated revenues, it says revenue from own sources. And in 2020, it's predicted to be much lower and then slowly grows again. And I'm sure we talked about this before, but can somebody just remind me why we predict that it's going to be so much lower this time?
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren, and any question's a good one. So thank you for that. Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. The increase in 2019 was due to the wildfire and the expectation of the sale of the timbers. So that is why it's decreasing in 2020. We're not expecting that to happen.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions around this report? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Item 8.2, or 9.2, City of Salmon Arm Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4353, Christian School Education Society, Horsting, 480 30th Street Southeast, LDR to NC. This is first reading. Can I have a mover and a seconder to that motion? Councillor Lindgren, Councillor Lavery. Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, this is the 0.41 acre lot directly south of the city overflow lot for Little Mountain Sports Fields. It's been on the market for a long time. There's a proposal to build a daycare on the property by Teresa Horsting. The current zoning, which is R1, allows for a daycare, but not for a commercial daycare. So a rezoning is needed. There's several zones that could support a commercial daycare. One of them is P3 institutional, and if P3 was being applied for, there'd be no OCP change needed. In this case, the applicant is going for a neighborhood commercial designation and zone, and so the proposal is to change the land use designation from low-density residential to neighborhood commercial. Thank
you very much. Councillors, any discussion around this proposed OCP plan amendment? Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just curiosity on my part, but do we know why she's applying for commercial instead of P3?
Director of Development Services.
We went back and forth with both ideas, and she liked the idea of neighborhood commercial, and staff actually encouraged that as well.
Okay, thanks.
I think for Miss Horsting, I think it's really about the number of children there. You can run a daycare, a small daycare, without the change in zone, But if you want to run a larger daycare, which is necessary if you want to make money, then you need to change in the zoning. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'm in support of this. I know at planning we did, and I can't from the notes determine whether we did it at the OCP or at the zoning stage. We did put an exclusion in there for from section 15C1 of items 4, 6, 12, and 2. And is it appropriate to do it here at the OCP stage?
I think that comes at the zoning stage,
At the zoning
so with the
stage, okay,
next
thank you.
motion, that would be appropriate. Any other discussion around the OCP amendment? All those in favor? Thank you, it passes unanimously. Now we'll talk about the zoning piece. Have a proposed motion for the zoning piece, if I could have a mover and seconder. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Lindgren, thank you. I'll ask the Director of Development Services to explain the zoning piece.
The same property located at 480 30th Street Southeast. There's an application to rezone that from R1 Single Family Residential to C1 Neighborhood Commercial Zone. And the C1 zone allows for commercial daycare. It also allows for 13 other uses. And at the Planning Committee last week, the Planning Committee recommended that a number of uses be excluded from the C1 zone by way of a covenant. Those uses were convenience store, licensee retail store, which is a private liquor store, neighborhood pub, and a video store.
Great, thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Council. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to clarify that if we were to remove it from this zone, it is not also removed from every other C1 zone.
Director of Development Services.
That's correct. A covenant would only apply to the property under application.
Okay, because sometimes we've added uses, and then when you add a use, everyone gets it, unless there's some other reason.
Director of Development Services.
That's correct as well. If you add a use to a zone, then it applies to all zones.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good question, thank you. Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks. I just wondered if you could clarify what a couple of the other permitted uses are. Number 8 is outside vending, and number 9 is personal service establishment. Can you just tell us what those are?
Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Sure. Outside vending, if, for example, daycare was up and running on that property, then a food truck could come in and vend. But that use was in there before the food truck bylaw, so it's even more permissive now for that type of vending. And not necessarily vending for the daycare, if it was a daycare, but somebody could set up an outside vending box.
Right. Would that include things like, say, a farmer's market in their parking lot?
There's size restrictions on outside vending. It's
Okay.
quite small,
Okay.
like 15 square meters,
Okay.
something
So
like
the kids
that.
could have a lemonade stand.
Yes, a lemonade stand would be allowed.
Okay.
And a personal services establishment is your hairdresser,
Esthetician,
planning consultant, engineer consultant.
lawyer's office?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Any other discussion around this motion? Councillor Lavery.
So, Your Worship, is this the time to put an amendment, an addendum to it?
Yes.
So I certainly just reflect the discussion that we had at planning last week, that that a section 219 covenant be registered in the property to exclude the following uses from section 15C1, as in our notes, 2 convenience store, 4 licensee retail store, 6 neighborhood pub, and 12 video store.
Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Lindgren, thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Councillor Lavery.
No, I think it was pretty thorough, fulsome discussion, and I think it was pretty clear that we don't want those activities at that spot.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the amendment from council? Okay, I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? Passed unanimously. We'll now discuss the motion as amended. Is there any discussion on the motion as amended? And of course, this is just for first reading to go to public hearing after second. Okay, all those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to item 9.4. Item 9.4 is City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw number 4356, zone 1159, Voyer C, 1540 15th Street Southeast, R1 to R8. This is first and second reading. We have a motion on the screen. Is there a mover and seconder to that? Councillor Wallace Richmond, seconder. Councillor Lindgren, thank you. Director of Development Services.
This is regarding a vacant property at the corner of 15th Street and 15th Avenue Southeast, 1540 15th Street Southeast. The application is to rezone the property from R1 single-family residential to R8 residential suite zone to facilitate the construction of a single-family dwelling with a suite contained in the house.
Thank you. Council, discussion on this motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to item 9.5. And this is City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw number 4359, Reed and Lawson Engineering Development Services Limited, 3341 20th Street Northeast, R1 to R8, first and second reading. If I could have a mover and a seconder for that motion. Councillor Lindgren, Councillor Wallace Richmond, thank you. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, this is a application to rezone the property address at 3341 20th Street Northeast from R1 single-family residential to R8 residential suite zone. For this property in question, the proposal is for a detached suite, not for a suite within the existing house, but a separate detached suite. The property is large enough, both in area and width, to accommodate a detached suite. It's a double fronting lot. Development cost charges would be applicable to a detached suite, as noted in the report. The OCP supports R8 zoning in this neighborhood. There's several other properties along the street with R8 zoning.
Great, thank you. Discussion by council. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. So those public hearings would be on the 25th of November at 7 o'clock.
That's correct for this application and the previous one.
For Mr. Voyers. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move forward then to item 10, reconsideration of bylaws. The first one is City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw number 4351, zone 1156, Brown, C and D and McDermott, 870 10th Street Northeast, R1 to R8. This is final reading. We'll have a motion on the screen. If I could have a mover and seconder. Councillor Lavery, thank you. Councillor Lindgren, Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, I'd just like to correct the ownership. It's Nova Capital Limited and Ian McDermott.
Okay.
There was a mistake on the front page of the agenda.
Thank you for correcting that.
The property is located at 870 10th Street Northeast. It is presently zoned R1. The proposal is to rezone to R8. And I've not caught up to you yet, so I'm not sure where we're at with this one, but if you just give me a second. Okay, so we received Ministry of Transportation approval on November the 6th, which was a requirement for final reading, and that's why it's in front of you right now.
Great, thank you. Council, any discussion on the final reading? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Passes unanimously, thank you. We'll move to item 10.2. City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw number 4355, zone 1158, Larson, 531 5th Street Southeast, R1 to R8. This is final reading. We have a motion on the screen. Could I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Wallace Richmond and Councillor Lindgren. Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, another R8 zoning in front of you for final reading consideration. The ministry approved this bylaw too on November the 6th, and it's in front of you for final reading consideration.
Thank you. Council, any discussion on final reading of this bylaw? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go to 10.3, City of Salmon Arm Cemetery Management Amendment Bylaw number 4360. This is final reading. We have a motion on the screen. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Lindgren. Thank you. Corporate Officer, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. The city's cemetery management bylaw currently limits double markers to only those burial plots that have 2 human remains. It was requested by both a funeral service provider and a citizen to allow this option when there are human and cremated remains or just cremated remains in the plot. The amendment under consideration allows for this option and permits up to 2 double markers on such plots. In addition to this important change, the amendment also corrects the name of the regulatory authority, Consumer Protection BC, and updates the material of memorial plaques to granite.
Great, thank you very much. Questions from council? Any comments? Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. And we mentioned it before, but just mentioned again, I'd like to thank staff for their responsiveness on this matter when concerns were raised both by providers and by individuals. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Any other discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. 10.4, City of Salmon Arm Curbside Collection Amendment Bylaw number 4364. Final reading. We have a motion on the screen. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Lindgren, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Thank you. Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. On October 16th, 2019, staff were informed by the Conservation Officer Service that the city's curbside collection bylaw is in contravention of Section 33.12 of the Wildlife Act, which is concerned with animal attractants. The amendment under consideration minimizes the time frame that food waste and garbage will be at the curbside to the morning of collection instead of the night prior. This amendment will satisfy the Conservation Officer Service and still allow sufficient time for citizens to get their containers to the curb.
Great, thank you very much. Councillors, questions or discussion on this item? Okay, we discussed it quite thoroughly at second and third reading. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to informational correspondence, tab 11. And I'll open up to any councillors who wish to speak to any items. We'll start with Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. Item 6, I just wanted to thank staff and the people that responded to this email. It sounded like there was a problem that was resolvable and staff took care of it and it was done. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Thank you to staff. Do you have any other items, Councillor Lindgren? Now you have the floor.
Yes, so item number 4 was a very confusing letter from a gentleman with some questions that felt like they weren't really staff issues. I wasn't quite clear if he lives within Salmon Arm's jurisdiction or if he's actually part of the CSRD, and I wondered if we had been able to respond to this letter.
I'll ask staff if they've spoken to
Oh, was
I think
that
it's
4?
Ms.
Hold
King,
on.
I believe.
Yeah.
Is that the one you
No,
want?
sorry, I'm confusing 2 items here.
Okay.
So that would have been item 7 that I was just talking about. 4 is something else.
Sure. I know the corporate officer and myself have been involved in item 7, so maybe I'll turn it over to the corporate officer to start with.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff in the Finance Department initially had a conversation with Mr. White regarding property taxes, as he had indicated he didn't receive his property tax notice. Staff promptly sent out a copy and have taken care of that matter. Mr. White was also concerned about street lighting and felt that perhaps his concerns were not being heard. And while I don't have an answer for that, the mayor and I will have a further conversation with him, and then try to help him with that concern. It appears that Mr. White is pleased that we've reached out and we're in resolution stage as
Okay.
much as possible.
So I wondered about the lighting issue, actually, in that he's in Countryside Modular Home Park, and would lighting not be an issue that the mobile home park itself needs to take care of? I know on our strata,
Director of
That's the
Engineering and Public
Strata's
Works.
issue.
Your worship, that's correct. The strata is in charge of the lighting within the strata, and because it's along the Highway 97B, there is no street lighting along the highway. So we are assuming that the lights that he is dealing with are within the strata.
Okay. And so, anyway, I guess you guys are in conversation with him, so that's all I
Yes.
was really concerned about.
Yeah, no, I
It was
appreciate
a very
that.
confusing letter.
Staff has had exchange emails with Mr. White, and I have also had conversation with him, and we have a telephone call set up for November the 19th at, or in the afternoon. Any of you that would like to take part are more than welcome, but the corporate officer and I will chat, and I think we're coming to understanding between both groups, so.
Okay, and I'll just speak to one more, item 4 from Daphne King. I guess my concern was that she was under the impression that having the bus terminus in front of Askew's was a good place for it, and she didn't have any problems with it, so why are we moving? She said it was, why are we fixing something that's not broken? I think it was important that we let her know that it was actually Askew's that asked for it to be moved, and from their perspective, it was quote-unquote broken. So I just wanted to confirm that we've had a conversation with Mrs. King, or Miss King.
Director of Corporate Services?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have not reached out to Ms. King at the current moment, but can do so following the council meeting.
Okay, I'm happy to talk to her if, I don't know her, but if it needs somebody to take care of it, I'm happy to find out how to get a hold of her and talk to her, or I can leave that to staff, whatever works best.
Okay, I think probably if we start with staff, and then we can reach out to Councillor Lindgren if that's necessary. I think getting out in front of the moving of the relocation of the bus terminal, I think is probably important for us to do, because I think there's going to be other people who are going to wonder why it's happening as well.
Okay.
Any other items, Councillor Lindgren?
I'll leave them for now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lavery.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Harrison. I had just a question on item 4 as well, 4, 7, and then 10. Does not the relocated stop, will it not have a shelter?
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your worship, I haven't driven by there, but the intent is that it will have have one shelter, and we've negotiated enough lease space from the mall to put a second shelter in if need be in the future.
Thanks for that, and I think that'd be helpful to transmit to Ms. King
thank
as
you.
well. On item number 7, and I'm glad that staff and Your Worship, you're going to be in contact with them. I want to do a little pushback on this letter, though. Certainly, Mr. White, he talks about things that are within the purview of the city, but he also talks a lot of things that we actually that we pass on. It flows through the city, and I think it's important. I'm fully confident that the mayor and staff will be able to discuss with Bob White. But my own pushback is that a number of those things are not within our control, and we just it just goes through on the overall tax bill. A lot of people get confused about that. I just, because I'm aware of it, talking about the regional library and it being doubled. Well, I'm not sure where those numbers came from, because the regional taxes have not doubled for the regional library. So I think that there is, when I take a quick glance at it, there's some misinformation there. And secondly, I think there's a philosophical part, and again, I don't want to beat up on Mr. White here, but at least the lens that I use is that we all pay taxes for services that we may or may not use. And if I run into the gentleman, I'll certainly politely emphasize that. But you may not use the library, but it's being a good citizen to pay, in my view, to pay taxes to support the library, to support the regional hospital, to support the schools and the kids that are going there. And so I we look at these numbers line by line, dollar by dollar. And it's our, I would say, it's our responsibility. This past budget was mainly about preserving infrastructure and public safety. That's really where the bulk of the tax increase came. And we made some really hard decisions, cutting out a lot of other stuff to emphasize on the core. And we minimize that. We minimize that as best we can, giving our own cost of living index in local governments that it's much higher than the provincial cost of living. And I think that I just state really clearly, for me, myself, it was a reasonable, prudent budget. And we have the responsibility for making sure our infrastructure is maintained and in place, and is responsibility for generations and residents down the line. So I have no apologies actually from my spot about the diligent use of what went into our last tax rate.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. We will have a complete discussion with Mr. White. Did you have some other items you wish to speak to? Okay, go ahead.
And the last one is, for me anyhow, number 10, Tom Peasgood, Salty Dog Race Coordinator, is asking for authority from council to proceed with the wonderful annual event they've had, and I would make that motion.
So do we need a motion there? Did you make the motion, Councillor Lavery? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Any discussion around the motion? Would you like to speak to it? Okay, seeing no speakers, I'll call a question. All those in favor? It's a great event. Councillor Lavery, any other items?
No, that's it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillors, any other items on any of those 14? Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Item 9, Your Worship.
Yes.
There are a number of points in Ms. Roel's letter. Could this be sent to the safety committee? Some of these things we manage, others the province does, but just in the interest of making sure her concerns are addressed.
Yeah, I think sending it to the RCMP probably would be the right location, perhaps. We'll just see what the Director of Engineering and Public Works feels.
Your Worship, I think both would be
Okay.
a good option. We can send the copy to the RCMP and then we'll put it on for informational correspondence on the Traffic Safety Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Any other items? Okay, seeing none. Item number 5, I just thought I'd speak briefly to that. And with Council's blessing, I'll reply to Mr. Geiger. I think when we get letters from people around taxation, and I think it's really good. I think people are, they read something and they're interested enough to care enough to send us what their opinion is, and I think that's a good thing. And so I think it's an opportunity, as Councillor Lavery was talking about, it's an opportunity for education for us and exchange of views. And so I would, if Council's comfortable with it, I would write to Mr. Geiger and I would copy Council. Okay? And we will also update on Mr. White. So I think the budgets are complicated, and we're lucky enough here to be able to go through them line by line. When you only get a little piece out there in the public, I think it's hard to understand sometimes. So I do appreciate people taking the time to write to us. Item number 11, letter from Jarvis White, President of Seniors Fifth Avenue Activity Center. I'd like to thank staff for, Council might remember in the 2019 budget where we had a letter from the seniors Fifth Avenue who wished to have the boulevard, part of the boulevard removed on 5th Street so that it would allow more parking space to make it safer when people parked on the street there. And as we know, there's a whole bunch of services in that boulevard and it would have been expensive to do. And so the Director of Engineering and Public Works, it was his suggestion to move the center line on 5th Avenue a little bit away so it's not right down the center of the road, and it's really helped solve the problem. Just something really simple. And I know we've talked about solutions like that for other things. So appreciate staff coming up with that solution and Mr. Weiss's letter. Item number 1, the building department statistics. Councillor Eliason's not here today, but I see a lot of good news in this report. Over my time on council, we see waves of residential happening, and then they're followed by commercial and industrial. And this year, the new industrial, if you look at item 11 and item 12, you add those two up, the value is about 4.8 million, which is about double that, more than double that of the previous year. And that's a sign. It's a sign that people have moved here, and now they're looking at innovation and looking at building workplaces. And so while the single family residential is down, multifamily is still pretty strong, and secondary suites, as we know, we passed a bunch today, certainly those more economic ways to build and live are still active. So while we're slightly down from last year, $52 million in value, when you look at the graph from past years, that's pretty high. So congratulations to the Director of Development Services and his department for the work there. The last one I'd like to comment on is the letter from Minister Trevena, which is item number 12. And I'd appreciated her letter because it really is closure on how the UBCM is supposed to work. And as we know, when we met with the minister and her staff, I think there was probably about 10 staff people there, and those are very important people. And so they certainly heard what we had to say, and each of the items that we talked about are responded to in this letter. I noticed the intersection of Highway 97 and 10th Avenue. If you've been out there, the new signage and lighting is now up and operating. So, you know, I won't say that our little meeting or made that happen, but I think the nudging that's been happening over the last year made it happen. And so appreciate her letter and appreciate the action of her staff. Is there any other discussions around any of those 14? Councillor Lavery?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And I just sort of taking off with your comment here, and I wish maybe the Youth Council were here at this time, but this is a good example of consistent multiple messages coming from different parties and different organizations and building a case. And so it's, meeting is important with the minister at UBCM. There, whether it's staff, the committee works that would happen through staff, the school district, all those messages coming in, they do make a difference. And it's just a good reminder that we keep on building the files and transmitting the information to the decision makers.
Great, thank you very much, I agree. Okay, we will move on then to 11.2, which is Community Housing Lead Urban Matters Memorandum dated November the 4th. It's a project update on the community housing strategy for council's information. It is part of the original package. Is there any comments around it? Was it in the electronic piece? Okay. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
I just want to mention that I appreciate this update, and I know that the community has been responding well to the survey, key stakeholders sharing that opportunity. This is good because it reminds us that this is an ongoing project, and so it's good to hear from the consultant, and that there will also be open houses, as I read it, for the public in December. So the work continues, and the update is always good.
Great, thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Thank you for your work on it as well. Councillor Lavery.
Yeah, and I was going to mention we've come a ways in a relatively short time in local government speak. One of the things I remain really excited about this. One of the things, my takeaways that I wanted to see was a really fulsome presentation from the consultant on strategies and public policy that council can consider. And so my question, Your Worship, through you to staff is, so that's it's sort of in a draft input form prior to the final report. And so my question to staff through you, Your Worship, is would that input take place in, I'm looking at the timeline here, there's a talk of strategy be prepared and reviewed by city staff and committee in February. Can we include an option for council to be part of that discussion to hear the options, or where is the best spot for council to hear about policy options? There are a huge range of them. And I think that we need to hear about them kind of before the final report.
Okay, let's just check with the Director of Corporate Services. Okay, Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, so looking at the timeline and project schedule, we are right on schedule right now. And in terms of what the RFP set out, what the consultant would do, the consultant is on track, and we do, Aaron and I will be having a conversation with Matt Thompson November 14th this week, just to update where we are at, where they are at. The community survey results are all in, they're being compiled. So we're still in the data collection stage right now. Looking ahead into December, one open house is being planned. That's in the budget for this project, one open house, likely here at City Hall. And then the next day, a meeting will be planned with the Housing Task Force. And I imagine at that meeting, that would be a good one for council to participate in if they wish.
Councillor Lavery? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for clarifying that. I think it's important too that we look at it in the draft stage. Councillor Lindgren? Oops, can you press your button again?
That's okay, it's on.
Okay, perfect.
So I just had a couple questions about the surveys. I'm not recalling any information about this, which definitely doesn't mean that I didn't get the information. I just can't remember. It says key informant interviews with 15 individuals. I'm just wondering how those individuals or groups were selected, and also curious about the 320 responses for the, it says survey on housing needs of the community. How did we select those people, and did we keep track of who they're representing?
Director of Development Services?
Your Worship, I'll speak to the community survey first. So that survey was advertised in the newspaper, I believe, on 4 separate occasions. We went twice, and then halfway through October, the results of the survey was just over 200 back. I shouldn't say back because it's all electronic, but inputted. And we went for 2 more ads in the newspaper. We kept it up on our website, and some of the councillors, I believe, were encouraging people to fill it out, and that increased the number of participants. Your other question on the 15 people, most of those people are on the Housing Task Force, which is almost like a committee of council, and people associated with either development in the private or nonprofit sector, and associated people.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Lindgren, any follow-up to those?
Yeah, so of the 320 people that inputted from the community, do we know, was there a question on the survey about who they are or who they represent? I'm just curious about whether or not homeless people would have seen, or low-income people would have seen ads in newspapers and had access to an electronic survey. So just wondering if we know who responded, not names, but just demographic.
Director of Development Services?
Your Worship, the questions did not specifically ask their situation to that specific extent, but it did ask if they reside in a home. So that's one of the questions.
Okay. Would it be possible for us to see those results? I'd be curious just to know.
Oh, for sure. I can get you a copy of the survey right after this meeting.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. In response, I believe members of the Social Impact Advisory Committee also made sure to reach out to their clients, encouraging them to fill out the survey, and there were paper copies available.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. Councillor Lavery?
And further onto that, Your Worship, Salvation Army with the new captain, and in terms of distributing it to clientele, I think whether that be through CMHA, Salvation Army, Women's Transition, so all the, basically through the auspices of staff and also through the Housing Task Force and through social media, hitting service providers in the community. I don't think it basically asked age and where do you see yourself. It didn't ask the question of do you have a...
Did it ask how much money you make?
Yes, I think it did have an income factor in there if I remember correctly.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the update on that. Look forward to moving forward. Any other comments on that item before we move to 11.3? Okay. Really appreciate the update. So item 11.3 is a letter from Don Nettleton from Okanagan Regional Library. Any comments or questions on that letter? Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just briefly speak to this. Letter has gone out to all local governments in the ORL. Essentially, and the introductory paragraph on the opening page talks about this, but essentially key major publishers in Canada have been putting embargoes on sale of titles and prices for print books. It's been a significant change across Canada, and the ORL, and I would personally urge us to support this, has been trying to be part of a Canadian-wide statement on equitable access, and that there's not only an embargo on new books, but there's an increased cost for distribution, and that also extends to the digital realm as well, and we've seen the explosion in the digital realm. In my view, the proposed costs and the restrictions are beyond what is reasonable, and this is asking for a statement on behalf of Council to support equitable access.
Okay, thank you. I'll just leave discussion, and then if there's a motion, fine. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks.
Again, Councillor Wallace Richmond, my fault.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Your Worship. I would be in support of this. I'm happy to. Are we making the motion quite yet, or?
Yes, a motion would be accepted.
I would make that motion if my colleague were comfortable with that.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Lindgren, thank you.
And so very supportive of this. Yes, absolutely true. Having worked in publishing for 20 years. Also true at the college level, at the high school level, at every level of every institution in education, including the library. And once drafted, the letter I would recommend should also be sent to the Minister of Heritage as well as our Member of Parliament. If is the letter directed at the Minister of Canadian Heritage? I believe that's the right department, federal department. But as long as it gets CC'd to the minister as well as our MP, that would be important.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Thanks, Your Worship. It's a statement of support going into Canadian Urban Libraries Council to then forward on to appropriate ministers. So I think at this stage the ORL is collating support for that, and I can certainly flag us at the time, and then we could support that when it comes around.
Your Worship, I would just add that in my experience dealing with publishing matters as the minister and the Department of National Heritage are fairly responsive to outcries such as this, so keep pushing.
Yeah, and I think that we could do that, Your Worship, if I may. It's just they haven't received this yet, and it's going to be the coordinated response advocating for that statement, and so I think it's a little bit premature, but I'll find out when it goes in, and we can CC it as well.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that staff is understanding, and is there any further direction from staff needed or from council needed? Okay. All right. Any further discussion from council? Call the question then. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to council statements. Item 14. Does any councillor have a statement? Please press your button if you do. Okay, I'll just make a brief statement just to let council know. I attended the Kelowna Airport Advisory Committee about 2 weeks ago, and its representatives from up and down the valley belong to that committee. It's an advisory committee to the Kelowna Council. Kelowna Council actually listens to the advice and then makes motions as they see fit. As you know, the Kelowna Airport is growing fast. It's the 10th largest airport in Canada now, as far as customers go. And so they have big plans for the future to try to meet the demands of the flying public in the Okanagan. The kind of action item that was at this meeting was whether or not to recommend to the Kelowna Council an increase in the airport fees from $20 to $25, which is the fee that you pay each time you use their airport. So there was lots of information provided, and in order to meet their capital needs over time, they feel that they need that increase in airport fees. So the advisory council did vote in favor of making that recommendation to the City of Kelowna. City of Kelowna will deal with that at their council meeting. So I want council to be aware. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I wouldn't feel right letting council statements go without a very public and heartfelt thank you to Bill Laird for the Treble Clef and the wonderful event hosted by Salmon Arm Economic Development, not last Saturday, but the one before, certainly from a perspective of arts and culture and gathering and placemaking. It's an absolutely inspiring example of how to do these things and how to do them well. And I know we'll look back and think, boy, that was a big deal, and look at us now.
Thank you very much. Thank you for mentioning that. That was a fantastic event. Okay, any other council statements? Seeing none, we'll move to other business. We have one item. It's item 18.1, a request for a letter of support for a grant for Creative BC. Make sure everybody's got that piece. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I want to start by thanking staff who was so responsive when this request came to me personally to write a letter of support. I'm never comfortable doing that without checking in with council and staff. The owner of this property, who is works in the creative industry, is very much interested in repurposing the space. And there is an opportunity through Creative BC, which is quite an going concern. I'm very active in BC in terms of arts and culture. A private grant that would be available, or it's public money available to private enterprise, which is not something we see every day. It's something this community hasn't been able to tap into as of yet. And so I hope council will support me and my request of you to write a letter of support for this property owner who has a big idea about transforming a downtown space.
Thank you. I'll accept that as a motion. Is there a seconder to that motion? Councillor Lavery, thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, I think you spoke to the motion. Do you wish to add anything else? I'll open it up to councillors. Any comments or questions around this motion? Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I certainly support this as well. And just in terms of a letter of rationale attached to the application letter is certainly hoping, the applicant hoping to meet with Patricia Huntsman when she comes in here. I think this is an interesting addition to the spectrum of capacity that we have for performing arts here. I'll rely on the committee and Councillor Wallace Richmond as to how that plays out, but it's a very interesting and wonderful addition to it, so I fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Just want to check through with staff, with the Director of Development Services. So the zone or the usage being proposed, if the grant comes through, hopefully, would fall within the C2 zone.
Yes, it would be considered an assembly hall.
Okay, there wouldn't be a DP necessary for that building?
My understanding is there's no addition proposed, so no development permit application. It's in the downtown specified parking area, so parking stalls do not have to be provided based on the floor area. And Mr. Newens is basically looking for council support in the form of a letter. No money. He's not asking for any money from council. And he would like to renovate the building and convert it into a performing center.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillors, any other comments around this motion? Councillor Lindgren.
Yeah, sorry, I'm mostly pushing my button to try and slow this down because I don't feel like I know enough about this to vote on it. So 180 Lakeshore Drive is where?
Councillor Wallace Richmond, do you want to respond?
This is currently the property where Living Waters congregation gathers. And they will no longer be gathering there. And Mr. Newens is the owner of that building.
Okay, and
Okay, Councillor Lindgren, go ahead.
sorry, he's proposed.
Just press your button again, just so everybody can
Sorry,
hear.
he's proposing to convert it into a gathering space with concert-style capabilities. And what's being asked of us? Just that we support his grant application through a letter?
That's correct. So the draft letter is attached, and he's asking council to support his grant by providing a letter of support.
Okay, and are we being asked to write individual letters or to support the letter that's coming from you?
We would need a motion for me to write this letter, and so that's what the motion is about.
Can I ask one more question?
Absolutely. Don't feel rushed at all.
Okay.
I want you to make sure you fully understand.
So this concert hall, how does this fit into our master plan that we're developing right now? And will this, I'm just wondering how this fits into what the community is envisioning and all the discussions around performing arts centers and the cultural master plan and stuff. Does this have any bearing on any of that? And vice versa?
Can I call on my expert counselor here, Councillor Wallace Richmond? Are you comfortable with that on this topic?
Thanks, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Lindgren. It's a very good question, and I appreciate it. What we need to understand is this is a private piece of property, and Mr. Newens' intention is to create an additional space where performances can be hosted, but also a recording studio, etc. It is within his purview to do that with or without the Creative BC opportunity. Creative BC is a BC agency that one of the rare ones that offers funding opportunities for businesses in arts and culture. And for those reasons, I feel that our support, it will do much more good than bad, and it does not negate any other efforts by any other groups to do any other projects.
Okay. One last question, just how does this compare in size to, say, the Shuswap Theater? 225 seats, it says. How many do we seat in the?
It's I believe Shuswap Theater is about 200.
Okay.
Or maybe less.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Councillors, any other comments on this motion? Okay. I'm certainly in support of the motion, and appreciate Mr. Newens coming forward. I think with providing an asset or trying to provide an asset for the community under private ownership. So I can only see good things happening And hopefully our letter will help him get a grant from Amplify BC. All right, I will call a question then. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Question and answer period. Is there any questions from the gallery? They're quite quiet out there today. Councillors, any other items before we recess for public hearing? Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thank you for another opportunity, Your Worship. Just through you to staff, I understand the grant deadline is fast approaching for the last item. So is Mr. Nguyen's able to receive the letter for tomorrow?
Director of Corporate Services.
Through your worship, yes, we will have it ready for him bright and early tomorrow morning.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lindgren.
Yeah, I just had a question about our energy, I can't remember what the meeting's called, on November 26th. I'm feeling a bit of anxiety about how it's all coming together. I don't know all the details, and I could sit down with staff that could fill me in on what's been done so far. The only piece I really know is that the meeting on the 26th is going to be, I think, for the EAC, the Environmental Advisory Committee, to attend with council and the, whatever the organization is that's putting it on, energy something, Community Energy Association. And I had thought when we originally agreed to do this at the $15,000 level that it would be open community engagement at this meeting, and that's not what's going to happen. So I just wanted to clarify whether or not I've interpreted that incorrectly, or if a change has been made for, and if so, why are we doing that?
Okay, Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, back in August, there were several motions made from city councillors, including Councillor Lindgren and Councillor Lavery, at subsequent council meetings, one after the other. One was to embark on some kind of climate action strategy, and at that meeting, a representative from Community Energy Association was here to present various options for the city for community energy plans. And out of the options that were presented, council agreed to the $15,000 plan, and that plan includes actually no public open house, but it does include a almost like a task force, if you will. One meeting scheduled for November 26th, as you mentioned, and it was thought that because there would have to be an invite list for that, because only 21 people can attend because of budget reasons. It was thought that City Council would be invited, senior staff, and the Environmental Advisory Committee. That made the most sense to us. The responses that we have to those invitations is not so strong. So we might have room for a few other people that are interested in, and my staff is working on seeing what spaces we have available for any extra people.
Thank you. Any other comments on that, Councillor Lindgren? I would suggest that perhaps you should talk to the Director of Development Services outside of this meeting. All right, any other items? We will recess until 7 o'clock. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you, staff.
You know what?
It's probably been a good year since I was in it because it just wasn't a good time. Just, yeah, not worth your while to bother with bigger stuff. Going in circles. Yeah.
That's how I felt when we were in there. It was like, oh, we're just gonna keep going. Although, you know what, if you looked at what we did in there now, we only did 3.5 kilometers.
Oh, really? And you did the outer loop how many times?
so they're going back. So, oh, there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. I'd like to resume this council meeting of November the 12th. We're into the public hearing section. I'll just check with staff and see if there's any additional items from them besides one we have listed.
No changes from staff, your worship.
Councillors, is there any changes to the agenda from you? Okay, seeing none. Any declaration of interest, council, on either of the items that we're looking at this evening? All right, I see none. Welcome to those in the gallery. So we have two statutory public hearings. One's an official community plan amendment, one a zoning amendment. So we'll have public hearings for those two, and then we'll reconsider the bylaws and vote on them. I'll start by reading an opening statement, which we have to do so for legislative reasons. So this public hearing for bylaws number 4348 and 4349 is convened pursuant to section 464 of the Local Government Act. At this public hearing, everyone will be allowed to make presentation to council, and all present who believe their interest in property is affected by these matters shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions. Those of you who wish to speak concerning the proposed bylaws should approach council and commence your presentations by clearly stating your name and residential address. The function of council this evening is to receive the views of the public. Council will not debate the merits of these proposals with individuals. However, council members may question presenters regarding their submissions. Everyone is encouraged to make his or her views known. Persons who wish to present written submissions may do so. Background documents related to the bylaws and written submissions that have been received by the city are available for inspection by the public and are located in the binders on the table by the entry doors. All written submissions will be retained by the corporate officer or reviewed by council and by members of the public at this hearing. To maintain order and ensure everyone a reasonable opportunity to be heard, the following rules of procedure have been established for this hearing. Please direct all submissions to the chair. Questions will be kept to a minimum, as the background information on these bylaws has been available for public review for the preceding 2 weeks. Following introduction of bylaws by city staff, the floor will be open for presentations, commencing with the applicant, followed by other interested parties in the order in which the chair recognizes them. There will be 3 calls for submissions prior to the closing of this public hearing. Members of council cannot hear or receive submissions from the public after this hearing is closed. The Director of Development Services will now explain the first proposal, which is Official Community Plan Amendment number OCP 4000-40.
Thank you, Worship. This is a proposed amendment to the official community plan by bylaw number 4349 for the property with legal description of Lot 1, Plan KAP 81982, civic address 1161 22nd Street Northeast. And the proposal is to change the land use designation in the community plan for a portion of the property from highway commercial to institutional to support an associated rezoning.
Thank you. I'll ask 3 times for any presentations, asking a first time if representatives from the Christian Reformed Church are here and wish to make presentation. All right, thank you. I'll ask for a second time if there's any presentations from the gallery. Before asking for a third time, I'll see if council has any questions of either the applicant or staff. Seeing none, I'll ask for a third and final time. Seeing no presentations, I'll close this official community plan amendment hearing, and we'll go on to 22.2 zoning amendment number ZON 1154. Director of Development Services.
And this associated bylaw is zoning amendment bylaw number 4349 for the same property, Lot 1, Plan KAP 81982, for a portion, the southeastern portion of the property, to rezone it from R1 single family residential to P3 institutional for the purpose of future church-related land uses.
Thank you very much. Again, I'll ask if a representative from the Cornerstone Church wishes to speak to this zoning. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll ask a second time if there's any other members from the gallery who wish to speak at this public hearing. Seeing none, Council, do you have any questions of staff or of the representatives before I ask for a third time? Seeing none, I'll ask for a third and final time if there's any presentations from the public. Seeing none, I'll declare these public hearings closed. We'll move on to 23, reconsideration of bylaws. The first one being City of Salmon Arm Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4348. We have a proposed motion on the screen. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Wallace-Richmond, seconded by Councillor Lavery. Council, do you have any questions of staff or any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call a question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. We'll move to 23.2, which is the zoning piece of this, bylaw amendment 4349. Again, we have a proposed motion on the screen. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Lindgren, thank you. Councillor Lavery, thank you. Council, do you have any questions or discussion around this item? Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I certainly vote in favor of this. I just wanted to extend the offer of possibility just to the representatives if down the line ever, and it's probably hard to get one's head around this right now, but an opportunity for thinking of putting affordable housing or a range of housing. There's some very interesting and creative federal and provincial support for that, and who knows, the window is open now, and who knows how long the window will remain open, but certainly I'll offer both our names, Councillor Wallace-Richmond and I, be available to talk about that as possibilities down the line. We certainly know that faith-based communities are often ones who have land, and they may have thinking of how to best utilize that land. So it's there, but I certainly support this part of it and extend that motion, that offer down the line.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. Appreciate that. Any other comments on this zoning proposal? Seeing none, I'll call a question on the motion. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We're at our question and answer period. Does anyone in the gallery have a question that they would like to ask us? Seeing none, we have a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, seconded by Councillor Lavery, that the regular council meeting of November 12th, 2019 be adjourned.
All those in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you for attending.
That was pretty painless.